Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Nazir, excuse me, not Nadarim. We're done with Nadarim, although now we're talking about a particular form of Neder, namely a Nazir Neder. And we are on daf Daled. We're at the Gemara at the bottom, 9 lines up from the bottom of Gimel Amabet. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. I don't think I have haven't opened the email, so let me do that first. And we are at the Gemara. We learned the Mishnah. The Mishnah provided a single opinion that says, whoops, I don't want that. That says that if you make a partial Nazir Neder, so you say, I want to be a Nazir, but only be restricted from not eating grape seeds. So then that tough luck, you're a total Nazir, is what the Mishnah said. And so our Mishnah is not like, we're going to see that there's a contradictory opinion. Even though our Mishnah didn't have it, our Gemara is going to begin with that contradictory opinion. So Masdisin, Delo, again, picking up 9 lines up where it says Gemara. So Masdisin Delogu Rabbi Shimon. Our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Shimon because Tanya we have a brisa that says Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says Einu Chayiv Ad Sheyidor Mikulam. You have to make a neder not to enjoy any aspect of any of the things that are prohibited for a Nazir, and only then will you be become a Nazir. Rabbanan Amri afilu lo Nazar ela b'chad mehon. If you say that you want to be a Nazir with respect to any aspect of it, Havi Nazir, you're a total Nazir. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to explain both positions, explain Rabbi Shimon's position and the sources, the scriptural sources for that, and we're going to explain the rabbi's position and the scriptural sources for that. And we're then going to say, well, why doesn't Rabbi Shimon say like the rabbis, and why doesn't the rabbis say like Rabbi Shimon? So that we can understand why everybody is holding their position and not holding the other. So my time at the Rabbi Shimon, what's the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon? Amar Kra, Mikol Asher Yaseh Migeven Hayayin, and then that if you from all things made of grapes or Migeven Hayayin, literally sort of is like from the vines of the wine, from the seeds to the skin. So basically everything in the grape. And if we take a look in the Mefarish on the left-hand side, where Rashi is ordinarily, so 4 lines up from the very bottom, Mikol Asher Ya'aseh, Mashma should Saruk Sheyehei Nozer Mikol Asher Ya'aseh. She'enu Nazir Ella Al Ella Imkain Nozer Mikulam. That when the implication of saying Mikol Asher Yaseh is that you have to say that you want to be a Nazir from each and every element. And if you don't include an element, well, then you're not going to become a Nazir. So V'Rabbanan, my taima, what about the rabbis? Why did they say it? So, and again, the first pasuk is from Bamidbar pasuk Parak Vav pasuk Dalet. The rabbis look at pasuk earlier, and it says Amar Kra Miyayin B'Shechar Yazir, that a person should will make a Nazir vow from wine and from aged wine. So and the implication there is if we take a look at the next Rashi, Amar Kra Miyayin B'Shechar Yazir Demashma Da'afilu Lo Nazar Ela Miyayin L'Chudei Havi Nazir Mikulam. That the point is that even if you were to say for one thing, that would imply being a Nazir for all of them. And so as a result, that's we've now explained both the Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis, and now we're going to explain why they don't say that. So we're going to start with Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon Nami Hachsiv Miyayim B'Shechar Yazir. So I don't understand why doesn't Rabbi Shimon say that like the rabbis? After all, it does say Miyayim B'Shechar Yazir. So Hahumi Baile La Asur Yayin Mitzvah Ki Yayin Rishus. So the Rabbi Shimon explains that no, look, I need that pasuk because for me that double reference to wine tells us that not only is a permitted wine something that I'm not allowed to drink? Meaning, if I just decide to have a glass of wine with my dinner, is that prohibited? But even wine that there's a mitzvah about, that will be prohibited. So, well, no, in this case, you can't have grape juice because even anything made out of grapes would be a problem. Now, you're absolutely right that often, sometimes people who can't have wine can have grape juice. But in this case, you can't even have grape juice because you're not allowed to have, if you're become a Nazir, you're not allowed to have anything that has from grapes. You would have to drink something else. That's exactly right. And, well, water would be one possible thing, but water, there isn't too many, well, there are some mitzvot that relate to water, but there aren't drinking that many drinking mitzvot that relate to water the way there are that relate to wine. So yeah, well, that's certainly true. So what is the mitzvah that we're talking about? Kiddush Havdalah. So let's say that it's Kiddush and Havdalah, because after all, whether at the beginning of Shabbos or the end of Shabbos, there's a concept of if we take a look at the top not yet. If we so there's a concept of Kiddush and Havdalah, because we have Zachoras Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. So there's a special obligation to make to emphasize the holiness of Shabbos, and so as a result, the Kiddush on Friday night and the Havdalah that we make at the end. So then those are biblical commandments, and as a result, that is going to be something that, based on what we're saying, you would, Rabbi Shimon's understanding this verse as saying that even though there's a mitzvah, as a result of your becoming a Nazir, you would not be allowed to have that wine.
But wait a minute, the requirement to drink wine for Kiddush on Shabbat is clearly rabbinic.
100%. We're going to get there in about 2 seconds.
Oh, okay,
So
sorry.
You are absolutely being mechavan to the next line of the Gemara. So at least according to Tosos. So Hare Mushba v'Omed alav mehar Sinai. So 1 second. So that is some. Now we're going to first read this the way the Mefarish reads it, and then we're going to read this the way Tosos reads it. So according to the Mefarish, Hare Mushba v'Omed alav mehar Sinai. 1 second. How could you possibly say that Nazir will prohibit drinking wine at Kiddush and Havdalah? Kiddush and Havdalah are something that existed from the time of Har Sinai. And we have, and so as a result, you shouldn't be able to undermine such a mitzvah. That's the way the Mefarish understands it. But the Tosos raises a number of questions with that understanding. So let's take a look. We'll look at the Tosos inside. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th Tosos. Mahi Kiddusha v'Abdalta Mushba v'Omi Mahar Sinai. And of course, the Tosos will get to exactly Charlie's points. So the Kiddush Hayom de Oraisa, right? That the implication is that the Kiddush of the daytime is de Oraisa. The Eichtachol alav Nazirot. And so he's now giving the simple understanding of the Gemara. And so as a result, how could the Nazirot fall on it? How could the Nazirut be applied to it? Meaning you have to be able to drink this because it's de Oraisa. The Kasha, the Adarabba, First of all, if you're going to say that it's de Oraisa, then fine. Let the pasuk, the whole purpose of this pasuk, right? The purpose of the pasuk is to say that even a de Oraisa should be overcome. So why, there's no reason to, the fact that it's mushba v'omid alav mehar Sinai shouldn't be a reason to stop the pasuk, the extra pasuk, right? So again, Rabbi Shimon is using the extra words of saying that the fact that it says from wine and from aged wine one must abstain. He's using that in order to tell us that we should overcome a mitzvah, and so let this be that mitzvah. Why not have it work? So that. Exactly. The pasuk's also from Sinai. Exactly. So lahachi itzra kraymin yotzer, that lomar dechayil ala nazirut. That's the whole point of saying that there's an extra pasuk. So let the nazirut be applied to the kiddush and the havdalah. V'od kasha. I got another question. Toso says, my mishani bazar hachi kigon shenishba lishtos b'chazar b'nadar b'nazir. We're going to answer this question by saying that this is actually talking about somebody who makes a shavua that they're going to drink wine, and so we say that that's what we're talking about. Well, da'asya nazirus v'chayil shvua. So why don't we say that the nazirut comes and falls on that? So meaning why are we going to differentiate between these two cases? Mikomokom tikshilo. Hare mushba va'omid mehar Sinai. We could say about that it's also mushba va'omid mehar Sinai. Klomer de'ain mushba va'omid goldel mazeh. There's nothing more than that, because the concept of shvua being obligated, that you're obligated to fulfill your oaths, that is something that was clearly commanded to the Jewish people at Har Sinai. Shenishba lishtos, and therefore, and because he swore that he was going to drink. V'od kasha, and moreover, the kiddush hayom lav d'oraisa, as Charlie rightly pointed out. The fact that you make kiddush during the daytime certainly isn't d'oraisa. Who denahi nami d'ksiv zachor v'darshinan zachruhu al hayayin asmachtahu. Moreover, the whole wine concept is just an asmachta. All right, so l'chein niru l'Rabbeinu Tam de garsinan bitmia. That it's the point of Hare Mushba va'Omed Alav Mar Sinai is not. Oh, 1 second. When you do Havdalah and you do Kiddush, that's the Oraisa from Har Sinai. It's saying no. It's asking it as a question and saying Hare Mushba va'Omed Alav Mar Sinai, is Kiddush and Havdalah actually from Har Sinai? And now we can understand everything. Mushba va'Omed Mar Sinai kolomer. Lama likra miyutar la'asar yayin mitzvah. Why do I need an extra pasuk to prohibit the wine of Kiddush and Havdalah? Because it's v'chim mushba v'chulu. Is it actually from Har Sinai? Is the concept of having wine for Kiddush and Havdalah actually from Har Sinai? We know that you can, if you don't have wine for Kiddush, you can use hamotzi, and if you don't have a wine for Havdalah, you can use Chamar Medina. So the whatever is another respectful and respectable drink. So as a result, we know that you don't have to wine. Yeah, pineapple juice might be good enough for Havdalah. Denehi de kiddush hayom de oraisa al hayayin lav de oraisa. That even when we say that kiddush hayom is de oraisa, that saying that Shabbos should be holy, that the obligation on us to make it holy is from the Torah. The yayin part of it is not deoraisa. Zechru al yayin asmachta, because the reference to doing the zechira on wine, that was just an asmachta. Bahashta mishani, and now it makes sense what the answer that we give, because now that we answer, our question is that Havdalah and Kiddush are not deoraisa, and our answer, or the wine of them is not deoraisa, and our answer is okay. So let's talk about when you make an oath that you're going to drink wine. And so what Rabbi Shimon is saying is that because of the verse, we're going to say that even if you make an oath that you're going to drink wine, we're going to say that oath does not, when you then become a Nazir, the Nazir is what's going to trump the oath of saying in wine. The Kamash Malan Kra Yisera Dechayal Aleha, that the extra pasuk tells us that even though you already had an oath in order to drink wine, that you are not going to be allowed to. You're not going to be allowed to drink that wine, even though you swore to drink it. So that is a very important clarification that Tosfos offers, and it makes the Gemara totally much more comprehensible. So now that the Kiddush Hayom is the Kiddush that we say at night. Correct. It's being the Kaddish of the day. It's and yes, that's exactly right. All right. Ella Kihada Amarava. So as a result, as Tosfos has already highlighted for us, we're going to answer that the situation of the Deoraisa is Shvua she'eshte. If the person swore that I'm going to drink, Chazar va'amar hareini Nazir, and then he swore that he's going to be a Nazir. Asya Nazirus chayla al Shvua, and so as a result, the Nazir applies to the Shvua, and as a result, he's not allowed to drink the wine. So V'Rabbana Nami. 1 second, the rabbis need to learn this same lesson. It's not like the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Shimon about that. That they have to prohibit mitzvah wine, just like voluntary, wine that you drink voluntarily. Well, im kain lema kra miyayin my vishechar. The point is that the pasuk could have just said miyayin. It didn't have to reference shechar. It didn't have to reference the old wine. So shamat minayai tarti. So the rabbis were able to learn from that pasuk two different rules. One, the fact that even if you made a neder or made a shvua to drink the wine, the Nazir's oath would override that, and to tell us that. If you make an oath with respect to any aspect of Nazirut, you become a full-fledged Nazir. You don't have to. We're not going to make you a Nazir. We're going to make you a full-fledged Nazir, even if you only swear about a piece of it, as we saw in our Mishnah. The Rabbi Shimon. What about Rabbi Shimon? Hainu taima dechasav shechar. So what's the reason that the verse writes shechar? La lufe. Shechar lamikdash, because he wants to teach us a different lesson in connection with drinking alcohol and specifically wine in the Beit Hamikdash. Diksiv yayin v'shechar al tesht ata uvanecha itach. That we have a pasuk in Vayikra that says that that the Kohanim are not allowed to drink wine, and it says yayin v'shechar. So my Gabi Nazir. Yayin hu delitzar aval shar mashkin lo, that when it comes to a Nazir, when we say yayin v'shechar, we're only talking about grape-based beverages. So afgabi mikdash nami yayin hu delitzar aval shar mashkin hamishtakrin lo. But other kinds of intoxicating or alcoholic beverages from other kinds of material that are not grapes, so that would not be forbidden. And la'apuke mid Rabbi Yehuda, and that would disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. And of course, the Chachamim here would include Rabbi Yehuda. And so as a result, that's why the rabbis aren't going to agree with this lesson, because what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Did Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, aval devela ki'ilos, if you get pressed figs from ki'ila, v'shasa dvash v'chalav, or you drink some honey or milk. I'm not exactly sure whether this is actually some kind of alcoholic beverage, but somehow it's also going to be intoxicating. V'nichnas l'mikdash, and you enter into the Beit HaMikdash in order to do the service, chayiv. So then you are chayiv. Now, it's not to say that won't raise the same issues as drinking wine, but you will still be chayiv. And so as a result, that the point is that therefore, Rabbi Shimon needs shechar for a different purpose than the rabbis. So ibayasema, or we could say that would be answer number one as to what Rabbi Shimon does with and aged wine. So or Rabbi Shimon leisle iser chala iser. Generally, Rabbi Shimon does not hold that if you have one prohibition and then you throw another one on top of it, so then the second one will not actually take effect. And for example, the Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Omer, ha'ochel nevela b'yom kippurim patur, that actually if you eat nevela on Yom Kippur in an inadvertent way, you're patur, you do not have to bring a sin offering. And the reason is that, first of all, if you eat nevela inadvertently during a regular day, you don't have to bring a sin offering because it is not a sin that results in kares. And so as a result, that's why you wouldn't have to do it for just the eating of the nevela, but you would have to if you ate on Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur, eating on Yom Kippur is a karis penalty. You're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. And so as a result, but because the prohibition of eating nevela already exists, so Rabbi Shimon says you can't, we're not going to apply it. So what does that say for us over here? So in connection, so Tosos helps us out here. We take a look at the Tosos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up from the bottom Tosos. Rabbi Shimon Leisley Isser Chalal Isser Perish Ba'alma. In general, he doesn't hold it. Kedetanya, as we learned in the brisa that we just cited about Yom Kippur. The ilav krahacha. Now, if we didn't have this pasuk, if we didn't have the word shechar in our pasuk, havamina, I would have thought hecha denishba shalo lishtos. If a person swears that they're not going to drink, the shuv hazir and benazir, and then he makes himself a nazir. So again, he said, that he prohibited for himself the drinking of wine, and now he threw a neder. And now he makes himself a nazir, v'shasa b'yayin, and now he drinks wine. Lo chayav ay nazirus, right? Rabbi Shimon holds that once you have one prohibition on something, you can't put on it another prohibition. And so, since he had already sworn off wine, if he now becomes a nazir, he's not going to be punished for drinking wine based on his nazirus. He will only be punished for his drinking wine based on his shvuah, on his oath, on his neder. So kamash malan kra. So the pasuk comes to teach us. Kamash malan kra yisera. The extra word comes to teach us. Demiyayin v'shechar. De'im, that from the fact that it says yayin and shechar. De'im nishba. That if one were to make such an oath, shelo lishtos kos, that they weren't going to drink this cup of wine. The neder b'nazir, and then he makes a neder of nazir. V'avar v'shasa, and now he violated it and he drank hakos, that cup. Delaki tarti, that he would get 2 sets of malchus, mishum shvuasa umishum nazirus, both because of the shvua that he made and because of the nazirus. Below tema kedika amarava leel shvua, and you don't have to, and as a result, we don't have to say like Rava, who said earlier that when we said that the shvua she'eshta ella tuchal l'taretz afilu shvua shelo eshta ketabirashti. So as a result, when we said earlier that what is the biblical violation that we're going to use this pasuk to overcome, so we'll use this pasuk to overcome saying that I won't drink. That if the person says I won't drink, so then even then, if you make the nazir vow, you are going to have an isser chalal isser, even according to Rabbi Shimon, who doesn't apply that rule generally. Okay, so now we've gone through the rabbi's approach and explained why Rabbi Shimon doesn't say that approach. Now we're going to turn it around and say the exact opposite. So, Urabanan, I'm sorry, we did the other. We explained we gave the rabbi's reasoning, and we've now explained why Rabbi Shimon doesn't use the rabbi's lesson. And so now we're going to do the exact opposite. So Rabbanan Nami, what the rabbis say also have the pasuk that Rabbi Shimon cited, Haksiv Mikol Asher Yaseh Migefin Hayayin, which seems to suggest that if you were to make an oath with respect to one aspect, maybe you should that you shouldn't become a nazir because you haven't prohibited for yourself every aspect of being a nazir, because after all, the pasuk says mikol, that you have to do it from everything. So Amri Lach Rabbanan would explain to you Hasam in connection with that pasuk, limid al isurei nazir shemitztarfin ze'im zeh, that the point of mikol is to tell you that every aspect of being a nazir gets aggregated together. And so as a result, if there's a question of did the person eat the right amount such that they should be punished, so we can combine grape seeds with grape skins with wine, and we can combine it all together to see whether an olive volume was consumed. And if an olive volume was consumed, then the person would be subject to punishment. Rabbi Shimon lays late sirup, and Rabbi Shimon, however, doesn't even need any kind of combination because because Rabbi Shimon taught in a brisa, Rabbi Shimon Omer kol shehu lamakos, even a little bit will result in the person getting makot. So the point is that he holds that it doesn't make a difference the volume. Lo amru kazayas, and what was the purpose of determining a kazayas? Ela le'inyan korban. That's only in connection with bringing a sacrifice if you do it inadvertently. But this is not something that's punished by kares, and so as a result, there is no chatas associated with it. So therefore, there's not going to be any obligation, and there's no need for any concept of mitztaref. And so as a result, Rabbi Shimon doesn't need the verse for this purpose at all. Okay, so that is that with respect to the concept of making of partial nazirus. And of course, we're going to hold, like the rabbis, that even if you make a partial nazirus, you're going to end up being a nazir. Everybody will say that because there's no kares. It's not a subject to a kares penalty. If you do it b'mezid, then you'll get lashes. The line about a korban is the statement that Rabbi Shimon is making here is a broad statement, is a general statement about eating prohibited items generally, not only about Nazirut. And so as a result, exactly. So where a chatas would be potentially applicable, like eating on Yom Kippur, so then you would combine. Then you would have to look at the volume, and you need the sufficient volume in order to trigger the penalty, trigger the korban. Okay, so now we're going to introduce Shimshon in the zeros Shimshon. So and so what is it, and how does it work? And what are the differences? So first, we're going to say, how do you become one? So hareini k'shimshon. If you say that I'm like Shimshon, or you say kibein Manoach, or you say I'm like Ben Manoach, kibal Delila, or like the husband of Delila, or kamisha akar dalsos Aza, or like the one who tore out the gates of Aza, or kamisha nikru plishtim esena, or like the one who the plishtim poked out his eyes. Harei Nazir Shimshon. In each of these cases, you're like a Nazir Shimshon, and the Mefarish explains it the way I just read it, that each of them seem to be independent. We will see in the Gemara that's not, and now we'll turn to the Gemara, that not everybody agrees with that explanation. Indeed, the Gemara seems to suggest otherwise. So why did I need to teach all of these? And it seems to be saying, why did the person who made the vow need to give all these details? So tzricha, you need to do them. Di'i amar hareini k'shimshon, because if you were to just say that I'm like Shimshon, haba amina, I might have thought Shimshon achrina. Maybe you were like a different Shimshon. Kamash malan keben manoach. That's why you have to also add ben manoach. Di'i tana keben manoach, and if you say you're like the son of Manoach, haba amina ikalamit grey hachi. Maybe there's somebody else who's called that. Kamash malan kival dalila. So that's why you also have to add bal dalila. And not only that, ukamisha nikru plishtim esenav. On the other hand, you could just say the one who the plishtim poked out his eyes, because that would be sufficiently clear that we know who you're talking about. And so Tosos here in the third to last Tosos, keshimshon kiven manoach kival dalila. Aval keshimshon lechudei. If you were to just say that you want to be like Shimshon by itself, o kiven manoach lechudei, or ben manoach by its own, lo sagi. That's not going to be enough. Ad sheyomer shloshtan. You have to say all three, that you're going to be like Shimshon, like Ben Manoach, and like the husband of Delilah. Kedemuchich b'Gemara, as is implied by the Gemara. Mekan ve'elach garis Rabbeinu Tam. That's how Rabbeinu Tam explains it. The kamisha akar dalsot azab bevav ukamisha akra shenikro plishtim as einav. So the point is that, and the last two would be ors with the vav. So if you take a look in our Mishnah, it does not have a vav before kamisha akar dalsos aza. So the Rabbeinu Tam is saying, no, put a vav there. So there's no vav between Shimshon ben Manoach and Baal Delilah. but there would be above before Kamosha Akar Dalsos Aza and Kamisha Nikru Plishtim Es Enav, because those would be independent. To Ka'amar, because those are alternatives. Kilomar, Shayomar Kamisha Akar, Kamosha Nikru, Chulu, Di Amar Kabal Delilah Lachud, Kamisha Akar Daltot Aza Lachud, Kamisha Nikru Plishtim Es Enav Lachud, Dahavi Nazir Shimshon, Baha Leka Lamit. Because if you were to say, like the husband of Delilah, it's interesting. I don't know why that you might think that you should really require all three there. I wonder what the Gimel the Amar Kabal Chud that if you were to say just that okay, all right, then if you were to say all three, so then any of those three, so then that would be sufficiently clear, and therefore you would become a Nazir Shimshon. So now that we've said what
one of the first three was one of the last two.
So if you say any of the last two, you're definitely good. If you say even just the according to Tosfos, even if you just say the Delilah one, you're good. But if you say either of the first two, or even both of the first two, it seems that you need to add the Delilah one, and only then will it be clear. Okay. Yes, apparently. Oh, not many Delilahs in. Yes, that's exactly right. Okay. So now the next Mishnah deals with the differences. So Ma bein Nazir Olam le Nazir Shimshon. What's the difference between the two? So the Mishnah answers Nazir Olam Hichbid Saro Make of a Sa'ar Umevi Shalosh Behemos. That if your hair grows heavy, and so then what you can do is you can use a razor to cut your hair, but you bring the three sacrifices. Specifically, you would bring the three sacrifices that would ordinarily be brought at the end of your Nazirut, but you're a permanent Nazir, so you're not going to end your Nazirut, but you would bring those three sacrifices, and that will be considered okay if your hair gets too heavy. The im nitma, and if you become tameh, maybe karban tuma, you'd have to bring the korbanot that were associated with a Nazir who became tameh. However, Nazir Shimshon, hichbid sa'aro eno mekel, but when your hair grows heavy, you cannot lighten it. You're not allowed to cut it. The im nitma eno maybe karban tuma, and if you become tameh, that's not going to be a problem. Tosfos wonders, I don't understand why. What about the difference about asking Hataras Nadarim? Because we saw that when it comes to a permanent Nazir, you're allowed to ask for Hatara, you're allowed to try to go to a Chacham and have it annulled. But when it comes to Nazir Shimshon, you can't do that. So why isn't that a difference? And Tosfos answers that no, we're only talking about differences during the time that you're a Nazir. That's a difference that would only be relevant when you're stopping your Nazirut. And this question is really about when you're acting as a Nazir. Okay, so Nazir Olam Man Dakashme. Who started talking about this Nazir Olam concept? How did you get to it? Now I understand that you're trying to distinguish between a Nazir Shimshon, but we haven't mentioned a Nazir Olam. So Chasuri Mechsa Rava Hachitani. So let's add in some words, and this is how we could read our Mishnah. Ha'omer Harein Nazir Olam. If one says that one is going to be a Nazir forever, Harei Zen Nazir. The person is a Nazir, and they're a Nazir forever. So Ma bein Nazir. Now that we've introduced both topics, so now we have the rest of our Mishnah. Ma bein Nazir Olam lo Nazir Shimshon. Nazir Olam hechbid saro mekel v'sar u'maybe shlosh behemot ve'im nitma maybe karban tuma. Again, the same concept that we saw in the Mishnah. These are the exact same words. That if your hair is heavy, so then you can cut it with a razor and bring some sacrifices, and if you become tameh, so then you have to bring the sacrifices for becoming tameh. However, Nazir Shimshon hichbid saro eno makabasar, you can't lighten your hair. The eno maybe makarban tuma, and as we turn to Dalan and Bet, you cannot also, and you don't have to bring a sacrifice for becoming tameh. Well, korban hu delo maisi. What is it? The implication of those last words? The implication of those last words is that you don't have to bring a sacrifice. But what do you have to do, or what is there? There is a sin about Nazirus Chaylalei, but you would have a Nazirus, and therefore you should be careful and not become Tameh. Well, Mani Masnishin, Who is that our Mishnah like? Because our Mishnah doesn't seem to be like anybody. Lo Rabbi Yehuda, lo Rabbi Shimon. It's not either Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon, which are the two positions that we have in connection with the Nazir Shimshon. Because we have a brisa that says the following: Titania, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Nazir Shimshon mutar litame l'mesim. Rabbi Yehuda says a Nazir Shimshon can become tame to a dead person. Because we find that in fact Shimshon became Tameh, and we'll talk about that I think tomorrow. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says disagrees. I'm sorry, we'll miss you. So Rabbi Shimon Omer, Omer Nazir Shimshon. Lo Amar Klum. And Rabbi Shimon says, if you say that you're going to be a Nazir Shimshon, you haven't said anything. Shalom Natsinu B'Shimshon, Shiyatzas Nazirus Mefiv, because Shimshon didn't say that he was going to be a Nazir. There's no basis for it. Shimshon was a unique situation. You cannot replicate that Nazirut. And so as a result, since you cannot replicate that Nazirut, so as a result, then it is since you cannot replicate that Nazirut, you can't just say it and become it. It's not possible. So money, who's our Mishnah like? Rabbi Yehuda. If you want to say it's like Rabbi Yehuda, ha'amar afilu lechatchila. Well, then he says that you could become tamei even lechatchila, which implies that the Nazirus does not apply to Tuma. And we just said that because we said that you don't bring a korban, that implies that Nazirus does apply to Tuma, meaning that there is a prohibition even if you don't bring a korban. But Rabbi Yehuda says there's no prohibition whatsoever. Umasnisim katani im nitma, because our Mishnah said im nitma, that you know if you became tamei, implying that you're not allowed to. So Rabbi Shimon, and if you say that it's Rabbi Shimon, ha'amar lo chayla alei nazirus klal, he doesn't say that anybody could become a Nazir Shimshon. So how could this work? Olam Rabbi Yehuda. So really, our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. But I Titani Gabi Nazir Olam Im Nidma. And since in the beginning of our pasuk we talked about what happens if a person becomes tamei, so Tananami Gabi Nazir Shimshon Im Nidma. So we use the same parallel language. So it's not actually. You cannot learn anything from the fact that it says im nitma that you eno maybe korban, because the im nitma that we're talking about was chosen. Those words were chosen just to parallel the beginning of that Mishnah. Oh, the beginning of our Mishnah. Okay, so
Question.
yes.
Wasn't Shmuel made Nazir not by his own words but by his mother?
You mean Shimshon?
No, Shmuel.
Oh, Shmuel. Shmuel was a Nazir? I think, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember him being a Nazir. He may have been.
Shimshon, but
Oh, he was a. I'm not familiar with
okay,
that.
I'll have to look at that again.
Yeah, let me know if you have a citation. We'll look into it together. Happy to help. Okay, so Lema. So now the question is can we say that this machlokus between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, with respect to whether one can become a Nazir Shimshon, does that have any? Is that related to the following machlokus? Lema beplukta dahani tanai kamiflagi. Maybe they're arguing in the same thing as the following argument in the following brisa. Ditanan, we have a brisa that says. If I say that this item is going to be forbidden to me just like a bechor, Rabbi Yaakov Otzer, Rabbi Yaakov says it's prohibited, Rabbi Yossi Mater, Rabbi Yossi says it's permitted. So what's this argument about? So my love, Rabbi Yehuda Savar La Rabbi Yaakov, that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov agree, Da'amar Lo Be'inan Dabar Hanidar, that you don't need to have that the object of a neder or the mechanism of a neder doesn't have to be a neder itself. So remember that when we say a neder, we're saying that something is like a korban. And when you bring a korban, that in and of itself is a neder. So when we say as a neder that we're prohibiting something by making it like a korban for us, so that is using something else that is done via a vow, and then we're going to apply that vow in another context. And the point is that a bechor, we're going to say that you need to do that, and a bechor is not a neder concept. It is its own concept that the Torah says that there's a bechor. So, for example, again, a person cannot just say that I want this item to be, I want this day to be like Shabbos for me or something like that, because the item of the neder is not itself a neder. And for Rabbi Shimon, and maybe Rabbi Shimon says, Sabra la Rabbi Yossi, he agrees with Rabbi Yossi, Da'amar be'enan davar hanidar, that we do require. So again, I'm sorry, that Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda say you don't require, and so as a result, even though the Nazir Shimshon was never a neder topic, we can because you don't need the object of the neder to be itself a neder. So as a result, or the mechanism of the neder to itself be a neder. So as a result, we can use a Nazir Shimshon, and that's why Rabbi Yaakov would forbid the item that you try to forbid by referencing Bechor, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda would say that one can become a Nazir Shimshon, because even though a Nazir Shimshon and a Bechor are not themselves objects of vows, we can use them still to make a neder. And Rabbi Shimon cover like Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon says like Rabbi Yossi, Da'amar be'inan davar hanidar. We do need it to be an object of a vow, and so as a result, Rabbi Yossi would say that because Bechor is not a vow, when you try to use it to prohibit something, it doesn't work. Just like if you were to say, I want this item to be like a nevela to me, it wouldn't work. And similarly, Rabbi Shimon, who says that when it comes to Nazirut, Nazir Shimshon is not itself the item that was created by a neder, and so as a result, if a person tries to make themselves a Nazir Shimshon, it will not work, because you need to use a mechanism of neder in order to create the neder. So no, that you don't need to say that these two arguments correspond. The Kuli Alma be'inan dabar hanidar. Everybody really agrees that it's going to be that you need something that is actually the subject of a neder. Everybody agrees that if I were to say that this mass should be to me like a nevela, that it doesn't work, because a nevela is prohibited from the Torah, and I can't make this something that's prohibited from the Torah. I have to use an object that is related to a vow. And so if I were to say that this is like a korban, because a korban is something where I make a vow in order to create the prohibition, so then I would be able to do that with respect to this. Okay, and so why then by Bechor is it different? The shiny gabi Bechor. So Rabbi Yaakov would say that a Bechor is different, and as a result creates a prohibition, because Diksiv Bei La Hashem, because it says La Hashem by it. Le Rabo says a Bechor, which comes to teach us that even though a Bechor is not an object of a vow, we're going to consider it like an object of a vow. And so as a result, that's why it's going to be, and because, just like we say Kodesh LaHashem in connection with our sacrifices, so too we would say this is also going to have a vow component for Rabbi Yossi. Why doesn't Rabbi Yossi apply that same logic and also result in having the Bechor be a valid mechanism for a vow? So Amar Lach, Rabbi Yossi would say to you, Hahu LaHashem mi boile l'rabos chatas v'asham. No, that LaHashem, which, by the way, the LaHashem is not written by Bechor. That LaHashem is written in connection with Neder, that the point of a Neder that is specifically to Hashem is going to be what we're going to allow be a vow. And so what Rabbi Yossi says is if you were to try and connect something to the holiness of a chatas or the holiness of an asham, that is going to work based on this LaHashem that it says in connection with Nedarim. Well, why are you going to add using LaHashem to tell us that if you try to reference a chatas or an asham in a neder, it works, but if you try to reference a bechor, it doesn't work? Those are all different kinds of sacrifices that you offer to Hashem. So Rabbi Yossi would explain, Merabah ani chatas va'asham shekam maspisan beneder, because when if I become obligated, yes, the original obligation of offering a sin offering or an asham offering. An asham offering, as a reminder, is when you're not sure whether or not you're obligated in a sin offering. So you offer an asham offering initially, and then if you find out that you in fact were obligated in a sin offering, you then offer a sin offering afterwards. It shows how sometimes being unsure about what you did is way worse than being sure about what you did. But in any event, so we see that that those two, even though the obligation to offer them is not triggered by a vow, when you have to choose the animal that you are now going to offer, you do it by designating it via a neder, via a vow. So as a result, that's going to be a sufficient vow connection that we're going to say that La Hashem tells us about those, but not about a bechor. Umotziani as a bechor she'ain maspiso b'neder, because that isn't triggered, there isn't a neder component associated with setting aside a bechor animal. For Rebbe Yaakov, what did Rebbe Yaakov? Why doesn't Rebbe Yaakov agree to that logic? Amar lach, he'll tell you, no, bechor nami maspiso b'nederhu. The bechor also is through a vow. The Tanya. Shall base Rabbeinu Amru, they learned in the base medrash of our teachers. Minayin nolad lo bechor b'toch edro shemitzvah alav lahakdisho. How do I know that when you have a bechor, you also have to consecrate it? Shene'emar hazachar takdish, that you're going to consecrate this male. And so as a result, the point is that you need to have you need to actually do something. And according to Rabbi Yaakov, that action is comparable to the action that you take with respect to a chatas and an asham. Rabbi Yossi Amarlach, and Rabbi Yossi would say to you, why isn't that enough? Yes, you do have to consecrate it, but it's already sacred, meaning even though there's an obligation to make it sacred, make the bechor sacred, it already has sacredness to it. So it's like Shabbos. Shabbos is already sacred, but we have a mitzvah to say it's sacred. And so as a result, that is not comparable to where you have a non-sacrificial animal that you turn into a sacrificial animal when you have an asham or a chatas. That's way more of a consecration. And so as a result, that's where I'm going to say La Hashem applies, and I'm not going to apply La Hashem to the bechor. So gaming now the Gemara continues and saying, well, with this we'll conclude. Gaming Nazir nami kaksiv La Hashem. Well, 1 second, we have this concept of La Hashem also by a Nazir. So doesn't Rabbi Shimon, who says that you can't be a Nazir, say that La Hashem by the reference to La Hashem by a Nazir tells us that you can be a Nazir for a Nazir Shimshon. Because no, the purpose of the La Hashem is to tell us something about the Nazir becoming a Nazir generally, and this is a story that we saw in Nedarim. So Amar Shimon HaTzadik said, "Miyamai lo achalti asham Nazir tamei." I never ate the asham of a Nazir tamei because chutz mi adam echad, with the exception of one case. There was only one case where I chose to eat the asham of a Nazir who became tamei, because in general, because I was concerned about their sincerity of becoming a Nazir, and so as a result, I didn't want to eat their asham korban. Shabai lai min hadarom, because this guy came to me from the south. Yafei anayim v'tovro, he was very handsome. Ukvutzosav seduros lo taltalim, and he had beautiful curls. Amarti lo. How can you destroy your beautiful hair? Amrli, roa hayiti la'avi ve'iri. I was a shepherd for my father. V'halachti lishov mayim min ma'ayan, and I was taking water out of the spring. V'nistalki b'vuashali, and I saw my reflection. Ufachas yitzrialai, and I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm so handsome, I could do lots of things that would be not great. Uvigesh l'tordeni mina olam, and my evil desires were going to cause me to leave this world. Amarti li elo, so I said to my evil inclination, Reka, you're terrible, you're empty. You have no business in this world. You, in the end, your body, this body of mine, is going to be, worms and maggots, because we all get buried and then become food for worms and maggots. the avodah is a language of making an oath. I'm going to swear. I'm going to shave you for the sake of heaven. So Amadi al Rosho. So I then stood up and I kissed him on his head. Amartilo, Kamoska Yirbu Nazirim B'Yisrael. There should be lots of Nazirim like you in Israel. So Alecha Kasav Omer, Ish Ki Yaflilin Dor Neder Nazir Lazir La Hashem. So that's what teaches us La Hashem. The Shimshon Lav Nazir who? 1 second. And Shimshon wasn't a Nazir. Ki Nazir Elokim Nar Min Abatim. If we take a look in this is the last line. If we take a look in the Navi, it says that he's going to be a Nazir. So doesn't that imply that there was an actual vow? No, Hasam Malachu Dekamer. No, that just an angel made the statement, but really it was not about. It was not itself a vow, and so as a result, that is the disagreement between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda in connection with our. Whether or not you can make a vow, and so as a result, that is the basis for our determining here whether or not one can become a Nazir Shimshon. So tomorrow, we mentioned that a Nazir Shimshon may become Tameh from the dead, and so how do we know that? And for that, you're going to have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. No. For how do we know it? Meaning, what's the source for it? Yes, we learned that in the Mishnah. So, yeah, excellent. We learned that in the Mishnah. But how does the Mishnah know? How does the author of our Mishnah know that? So, who wins? Shimshon wins. Shimshon was a very strong guy. So, he's going to win all of the arguments. All right. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos. Look forward to, God willing, we'll pick up, I believe, 45 minutes after Havdalah.
Mark, if you want to participate